Hi, I'm Jeff Carter with Seattle CityClub, and today I'm talking with Ben Farrow, Director of Clean Energy Strategy with Puget Sound Energy. And this is all a part of our virtual Civic Boot Camp on COVID-19 and climate change and justice. So thank you, Ben, for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly glad to be here.
For those who don't know, and I'm sure most people do, but a little bit, but what is Puget Sound Energy and what is your role there?
Yeah, so Puget Sound Energy, we're a combined utility, which means we provide electric service and natural gas service. We serve about 1.5 million customers in the western part of Washington and a little bit of eastern Washington. So what that means is we serve about a population of about 4 million people. So that makes us kind of a mid-sized utility in the US. We've got 3,100 employees here in Washington State with our service partners of a couple thousand more than that. So we're very much a Washington-focused company, focused in the communities we serve.
And what is your role at PSE?
Yeah, so I'm the Director of Clean Energy Strategy. As we've been making a transition towards clean energy, and I can talk more about that if you want, but we've been on this journey for a while now. There's some new regulatory requirements in Washington that go to a very high percentage of renewable or non-emitting, i.e. carbon-free energy. And so the company said we need kind of new focus on that, additional hands working that way. We're in many ways a clean energy company across the board, but I've got some unique roles in terms of helping plan and helping work that into the business cycle as well as the regulatory cycle.
So kind of, if you could give us an overview of what Puget Sound Energy does regarding climate change, climate-friendly initiatives and programs.
Yeah, so I think for us, climate in many ways goes to environment. And so I think some of the less thought about climate things that we think about are really around what's the impact of precipitation and temperature shifts. And because we get so much hydropower in the region, you know, the impacts on salmon, the impacts on what the runoff patterns look like, that all really matters to power supply in the Northwest. And so that's something that we pay attention to from a climate perspective that I think not a lot of people do know, but probably the thing that gathers the most attention is really our energy supply portfolio. And so just some things we've done both currently and moving forward there. The first is really around energy efficiency. We're more than 30 years into energy efficiency at this point. It's a big part of our power supply portfolio. It's the kilowatt hour you save is the kilowatt hour you don't have to find. So that's been a big focus and will continue to be a big focus. The next piece, just chronologically, was roughly 20 years ago, we started adding optional customer programs for green power, for different types of green power. Like we've got a solar choice program, we have something called Green Direct, but really these are customer programs or customers that say, you know, I want to make sure I'm getting 50%, 80%, 100% renewable energy, or on the gas side, carbon-free energy, can sign up for those programs. So that's been in place for some time. Then about 15 years ago was when we added the first wind power into the core energy portfolio, or core electricity portfolio. So that was, we brought in 3 wind farms over a period of years, made us one of the largest owners and operators, utility owners and operators of wind in the United States. So that's sort of where we've been. Now, as we look forward, Washington has a new law as of last year called the Clean Energy Transformation Act. And that sets new targets for clean energy and clean electricity in Washington State. So the first of those is to eliminate coal out of the electricity supply to Washington by 2025. The second one is to be carbon neutral in electricity supply by 2030. And then the third one is to be essentially 100% clean energy by 2045. So that's a pretty big change, and just some things that are already happening around that. The first is at the end of last year, we announced that the closure, along with our partners in the plants, of 2 of the power generating units of the Colstrip Power Plant in Montana. That's been a big part of the Northwest power supply for many decades. But as prices have changed, as the plant has aged, it was time to look to cleaner and newer sources. So that was one change that's happened. And then just literally this year, we've signed a few new power purchase deals. One was for some biomass energy out of Mount Vernon. The second was for power from a tribal owned and operated hydro facility in Montana. So we've been already evolving our power supply portfolio. Generally, we're halfway, maybe a little bit more towards that 2045 target. So we still have a ways to go, but that's really the focus over the next decade, is making progress there.
And so what is, now we've had this pandemic and everything is shut down and the whole global system has changed. What's been the impact of the pandemic on your programs and operations?
Yeah, let me talk about operations first. So the first thing for us is, we're very much a company that is out. Say like most of our employees can't work at home because they may be working in customers' homes. So we've had to make some operational changes around that. Probably the biggest one that we felt is the halting of construction activity in Washington. So we really had to pare things back to essential construction only. As the state and CDC guidance evolve, we'll be looking to ramp those activities back up in support of customers and our planned work that we need to keep going. But that was sort of an immediate hit from an operational standpoint. From a customer standpoint, that was something that was obvious right out of the gate. So we've made some changes in customer programs and approaches. And the first one of those was really around eliminating service disconnects during the COVID crisis. So that's been in place really since the beginning of the crisis. We saw early on that customers would have financial difficulty, and especially if you're stuck home, you shouldn't be put in a position of being stuck home without power or heat. So that was one. The second one, and we've extended a number of provisions around that already. The second big one was setting up some new payment assistance programs and community programs. So we set aside about $11 million as part of a new payment assistance program for people that have been affected by COVID, that really never thought they would need a payment assistance program. But that just launched a couple of weeks ago. Really good receptivity and demand so far. I think of that $11 million, they sort of have 4,500 customers, maybe a couple $1 million that are already sort of committed to customers, and it's really designed to help customers through what is hopefully a one-time event. So those are a few things. The third, probably customer side piece, before I talk a little bit about the clean energy, is around contributions in the community. So we've been focusing a lot on basic needs and support for really COVID issues. So a lot more redirected giving, increased giving into food banks and food distribution, as well as some work with advertising around public health and personal protective equipment for medical workers. So that's been some of the customer. And then finally, on the clean energy side, where we've kind of felt COVID the most is around some of our energy efficiency programs, because a lot of those programs are pretty hands-on. There's energy audits, right, that are in people's homes or businesses, and those sorts of activities had to stop because of COVID. People are working out all kinds of great creative solutions about how do we do this virtually, things that we would have had a contractor installing in the past. Sometimes they're working with the customer to coach the customer through installing light bulbs or shower heads, things like that. So a lot of creative stuff going on there. But that's a place in the clean energy space that we're feeling and hoping to be able to get back up and running safely as the state and the CDC change their guidance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Has it been a challenge to provide the same level of service to people through the pandemic, just in terms of what you normally provide?
Service level has been pretty similar. We're just having to find different ways to get things done, if that makes sense. We found all kinds of creative solutions to maintain social distance, work with customers virtually, those kinds of things. But we haven't really, with the exception of those construction activities and some of the direct install programs, we haven't really had to pare back work. And that's really a temporary thing that we're trying to work around so we can keep moving forward.
So in terms of the environmental programs that you run, are they also able to move forward even despite the pandemic, or is it a challenge to keep those going?
No, it's been, I'll use the Green Power Program as a great example, right? A couple of years ago, we had launched a new online portal for sign up. And so there's a lot of things that we can keep moving. The energy industry as a whole is pretty familiar with, pretty comfortable with 24/7, 365 operations. So even, even the power markets continue to move on. We've done things like signing new agreements for power supply. We just signed an agreement earlier this week for some renewable natural gas. So, business is moving. It's just a little different right now.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think we've learned from this pandemic and the impact of the pandemic? What do you think you've learned based on what's happened so far?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning has really been about the people impacts, but also the people opportunities. We spend a lot of time on preparedness and being ready for natural disasters of various kinds. Actually, one of our business continuity drills last year was actually a pandemic. Unplanned, it just was, we happened to choose that scenario. And so I think the pandemic part, while obviously a challenge for everybody, has been, the business continuity side has gone pretty well. Where we really learned some things is about the people side in terms of the support employees need, the support customers need, and the partnerships that you develop in times of crisis. And people are all aligned, they're working in the same direction, right? And so how do you take that forward? And I think climate's a great example of that, where, we've had to all innovate and work together towards a common goal in COVID. How do we take how we do that and apply it to climate in the future?
And that's a good question. What can we do to apply the lessons? What are the best lessons we can apply to the climate issue?
Seek partnerships, be collaborative, and try some things, learn some things, adapt quickly.
Yeah. And in terms of like the pandemic response, how can we be better prepared for the next one? I know we're in the one right now, but how do you think we can be better prepared for the next one that comes along?
I think we'll all think differently about our home emergency supplies and what we do or don't have on hand moving forward. I think that's definitely a clear takeaway for all of us from this.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's hopefully not a new or sudden pandemic, but I think it really comes down to be prepared and make sure you've got those connections to work together, because you don't know what really is going to come next. But we know that by working together, we'll be able to solve it.
Well, sort of speaking of working together, I saw that you're on the Western Washington Clean Cities Coalition. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, the Clean Cities Coalition is a public-private group that is really focused on reducing emissions in the transportation realm. And so it ranges everything from, helping support alternative fuel vehicles, to basic things like, are there better things we can do with the size of the vehicles we drive and the routes that we use? And so a lot of the membership are fleet owners or operators or partners in that, but that's really the goal of the organization. We actually set targets for reducing fuel use and measure how well we do on that.
Great. And then this is, we talk a lot about civic engagement and what people can do. Do you have any suggestions for what just the average person can do to address climate change during, especially during this crazy time?
Yeah, sure. You know, so much of what we need on climate change in general is, and speaking from a clean energy perspective, is really people to take action. We see this as being something that, together with our customers, is a long-term and challenging problem to solve. But it's that togetherness and collaboration that's going to get us there. So, just some thoughts about socially distant clean energy while you're at home. So some basic things. People are using more hot water because they are at home. So make sure your hot water is set to 120 degrees. You know, that's a big energy saver, actually. You can always check out our renewable energy programs or from PSE or another utility online. So that's a great thing you can do to sign up. And then I think the last thing is we're all sitting in front of our computers a lot more. You know, make sure you've got your computer set to a lower tone or to an eco mode. See if you can turn off some of the indoor lights and use natural light. And probably most important, see if you can get a little time away from the computer and get outside too.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is great. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say for the people attending the boot camp regarding Puget Sound Energy?
No, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'd love to talk more. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing to keep this going and keep it going online.
Great. Well, thank you again, Ben. I really appreciate it. And thank you to our Civic Boot Camp supporting partner, Alaska Airlines, for helping us through this time as well. So again, really appreciate it, Ben, and stay safe. Have a good day.